Welcome to the Clarity Coach Podcast with Rockie Lee, strategic intervention coach, specializing with singles and couples, helping them find clarity in life, in relationships, and in personal development. And now, here's your host.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 22 of Clarity Coach Love Talks. I have with me again my co-host, Kimberly. She'll be joining us here on the conversation today as we're going to be talking about the power of forgiveness. Healing your marriage starts with forgiveness. That's really my subtitle there, but it's all about the power of forgiveness. So, hi, Kim.
Hi there, Rocky. How you doing? And hello to all of our listeners. I'm really looking forward to this conversation today, where you're going to talk about why healing your marriage starts with forgiveness. So tell me, Rocky, why do we need forgiveness? Like, would it even matter if we're in a financial rut or self-image rut, relationship rut, pain or hurt rut? Why would forgiveness even come into play there?
Yeah, the truth is we so need forgiveness, every single one of us. And here are the two main reasons why. Number one, we can't heal in our life without forgiveness. Like anytime we hurt or we have pain or trauma in our life, the antidote to all of that, the process of healing, is through forgiveness. That's number one. Number two, the way that we choose to see, hear, or believe things about our life, right? So the way that I choose to hear or see what a person says to me, or how they react to me, or what I believe about them and what their reactions are to me, or what they're saying to me, all of that is tainted through bitterness. And the only way to actually remove that taintedness so that my interpretation of what you say to me is not tainted, well, the only way through that is through forgiveness. So for me, regardless of the rut that we're in our life, whether it's financial or relationship or pain and hurt stuff, all of that is essentially healed through forgiveness. And I mean, there are so many stories about that, and I'm just going to leave it here for that, and then we'll maybe dive into it later on. But really, to answer the first question, why do we need forgiveness? We need it for two reasons: for healing and to change the way that we see, believe, or hear life as it is right now. And without that, we can't. We'll listen to everything through a tainted way.
So when we're talking about the process of forgiveness, do we need to go to a person and tell them that we're forgiving them? Like, are we supposed to let them know, or is that something that happens internally?
Yeah, wonderful question. And here's the quick answer to it is no. Okay, so this is where we get confused, the difference between making amends versus forgiving. So the reason why I don't actually have to go to my wife to forgive her, it's because really making amends is that process, right? So making amends is when I have done something that has violated this person physically, right, or verbally. So if I've said something really, really harsh, or I've physically hurt somebody, or I've broken their belonging, right? Those are reasons why I would want to go and make amends about that, right? Where I go to somebody and say, hey, I'm really sorry for having said this, right? Or I'm really sorry for having physically touched you this way, or I'm really sorry for how I borrowed your lawnmower, but I broke it, right? I'm really sorry. So that's making amends, okay? Forgiveness, though, has nothing to do with that. Forgiveness is about my beliefs, it's about my judgments, and it's about what I am feeling. And all of that is self-contained within me. So forgiveness actually doesn't need the participation of another person, but it does need me to take action to something.
So if it's just within yourself, then what really is forgiveness about, if not forgiving another person? Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, forgiveness is really about me. And here's the reason why. When we're actually struggling with unforgiveness, which is essentially bitterness or hatred, could be another way to say it, or resentment is another way to say it. Forgiveness is really about letting go of the poison that comes through those things. So whether I'm full of hatred, or I'm resenting somebody, or I'm absolutely bitter about somebody, this poison is what's actually destroying my life. it's actually not the person who has done me harm, because that is actually an event, and that event has happened once in my life. But what I keep replaying in my head is a memory of that, and that memory comes with a judgment. So what I keep doing is I keep replaying in my head the judgment, which is the bitterness, and it's a poison. So forgiveness is about letting go of that poison or healing from that poison. And forgiveness is about letting go of the meaning that I'm hanging on to, which is the judgment.
So if you'd like to touch then on the opposite, what is not forgiveness and what will it not do for a person?
I love answering this question because many times people get so caught up with wanting to just understand forgiveness first, but they don't really understand what forgiveness isn't. So thank you for asking this question. Well, number one, forgiveness is not ignoring, turning a blind eye, or not acknowledging or denying that something has happened, right? So what we do is we commonly say, oh, I don't really think about it much anymore, so I think I've forgotten.
Doesn't mean it's not there.
Yeah, right. Or I might say something like something similar, like I don't dwell on it anymore, or I don't think about it anymore, I don't bring it up in my mind anymore. All of these things are all aspects of denial or ignoring, right? So anytime we do that, that's essentially what we call sweeping things under the rug, right? We're just not addressing it. We're just kind of trying to move on with life. So that's not forgiveness. The other aspect is that forgiveness isn't just about forgetting. Forgetting is a byproduct of forgiveness. So people have this misconception that, well, I can't forgive because I can't forget. And it's not true. The reality is that you can actually start to forget only if you go through the process of forgiveness. So just the idea that I can't forget, right? That's really not forgiving, I should say. And also the idea that I'm just trying to forget, that's not forgiveness either. All right. Mm-hmm. The third one would be forgiveness has nothing to do with changing someone, and forgiveness has nothing to do with stopping someone from their behavior. So me forgiving someone will never, ever change somebody, and it will never stop them from their behavior. And this is why forgiveness has everything to do with me. So it's how I feel, what I make about the situation, the judgment that I have about that person. Those are all the poisons that I'm dwelling on, that I'm eating on, that I'm feeding on, that's destroying me on the inside. So forgiveness has nothing to do with those four things that I've just listed out.
So it sounds like there's an element of acceptance in there as well.
Absolutely. I don't think that we can ever heal until we fully own the hurt. And this is a part of the tricky thing about our brain. Our brain is so smart. It's so intelligent. We can go through a really deep traumatic event, and one half of our brain will kind of like talk to people like as if, oh, it's okay, I'm over it now, it's just water under the bridge kind of a thing. But the other half of our brain will dwell on the hurt and pain. So we kind of play this cat and mouse, this hide and seek kind of a game. So it's really, really vital that we own and accept that we have been hurt and that we're able to face it.
Interesting. All right. So I can see we're coming up against a quick commercial break here, Rocky. Listeners, hang on a second, and we will be right back to talk more with Rockie Lee.
More with Rockie Lee, strategic intervention coach and host of the Clarity Coach podcast after this.
Having clarity in our lives is of the utmost importance. Clarity is the pathway to change, the juice that gets us up in the morning, the purpose that inspires us to strive for something greater. Clarity is also the ability to see things in a different way than how we believe them to be, giving us options to the possibilities that surround us. Clarity gives us the courage to bring change to the issues that hinder us from believing for a better tomorrow. Rockie Lee is a strategic intervention coach and will help you find clarity in life in relationships, and in personal development. For more information on Clarity Coach workshops or to book a coaching session with Rockie Lee, call us at 778-883-7203. That's 778-883-7203, or visit us online at www.claritycoach.ca/bookings. That's www.claritycoach.ca/bookings.
Now, back to Rockie Lee, strategic intervention coach and host of the Clarity Coach podcast.
And we are back talking to Rockie Lee on this episode of Love Talks. We're talking about forgiveness. So, Rockie, what is forgiveness and what does it do? What really are the benefits?
Yeah. As I've mentioned before, forgiveness is all about letting go of our hurt and pains from the past. And that means anything that just happened to me 1 second ago to all the way back, as far back as I can remember, all of that is fair game. All of that is junk that we're needing to let go of. Okay, so that's the number one thing. So forgiveness is all about letting go of our past hurt and pains. Second to that, when I get hurt, I'm not just replaying the event in my mind. That's not what's actually hurting me. What's hurting me is the judgment that I make up in my mind. So for example, if I ask a girl out on a date and she says no to me, it's not the no that hurts me. It's what I believe about that no. So in my mind, what I'm doing is I'm replaying in my mind the memory of a girl saying no, but I'm actually replaying also subtitles. And the subtitles will have a judgment. And the judgment will be, oh, she doesn't like Asian people. Or, oh, she doesn't believe that I'm enough for her. So that's the judgment that I need to let go of. So I'm letting go of past hurt and pains, but I'm also letting go of the judgments that surround those hurt and pains that I've created. So that's the main issue about what forgiveness is. Now, what does forgiveness do? So here are a couple of things that forgiveness will actually do for us. Number one, forgiveness will stop us from poisoning ourselves. Now, I keep bringing up the word poisoning, but I want you to think of it like from this perspective that poison is just like you sipping poison, but you're hoping somebody else dies. So what you're doing is when you forgive somebody, you're stopping yourself from drinking that poison again. All right. So that's what it does do. Number two, it stops us from complaining and blaming. So anytime you hear yourself complain about something or blame somebody, that's a key indicator that you have some bitterness going on. And forgiveness will stop you from actually having to live your life complaining or blaming again. Forgiveness will also stop you from time traveling. So I'm a total sci-fi nerd underneath, and I never believed that we could time travel. And then I realized that we actually time travel all the time. We'll be in a conversation. Yeah, right. So we will have a conversation with somebody. They'll say something that will trigger a memory. And in that moment, even though I'm looking at this person, my mind is somewhere else. I'm actually playing something from my past in my head, and I'm more alive there, or I'm more engaged in the past in my memory than I am with the person in front of me. So forgiveness stops us from time traveling. Another one is forgiveness stops us from projecting our junk or our chatter in our head onto our partner. So it's kind of like if my partner says something to me and I immediately interpret it and spin it around and put a negative spin to it and then spit it back to them. Well, that's kind of my own junk that I'm projecting on them, right? So forgiveness stops me from doing that, where I can purely hear what somebody says. And last but not least, forgiveness stops us from suffering. And this is really vital. I want to help you guys understand as the listeners that there's a difference between getting hurt in life and suffering. So the reality is that getting hurt, right, falling down, feeling pain, this is life. We can't prepare for that. We can't stop it. We can't predict it. It's just a part of life. But suffering's a choice. So what forgiveness will do is stop us from choosing to suffer.
Interesting. So suffering sort of plays into, I feel a little bit like the poisoning that you were mentioning. Can you tell us more about the poisoning and the suffering that happens within a person?
Yeah. So the poisoning, again, the analogy was like you're sipping poison, but you're hoping somebody else dies. Right. So the idea of this poison is that it comes from the idea of bitterness. And think of it like mold in a wall, right? So if you've got like a really old home and there's molding in the walls, well, that molding is toxic, it's poisonous, and it's there and it's silent, but it lives in your wall. And the more you don't do anything about it, the more it begins to poison you. Well, bitterness is the same thing. It works the exact same way. It's very cancerous. Like it affects the way that we see things, the way that we believe about things, and the way that we hear people talk. All right. All of that is affected by it. And so what it does is it causes us to create judgments. And these judgments we will continue to live out over and over and over and over again. So I might say, I might call out a friend and say, "Oh, you are such a liar." Well, the more I believe that judgment, the more I actually begin to see in my own interpretation that this person's a liar. So pretty soon my whole personality, how I treat this person, how I react to them is all based around the belief that this person's a liar. And they're probably not. They just probably told a white lie once. But it hurt me so much that I made it out of belief that, "Oh, you're always a liar. You always lie." Well, guess what? Every time I bump into somebody that's similar to my friend now, I'm going to believe that. So I'm going to
Yeah,
start
because you're
talking
carrying all
from
that
that.
around.
Exactly. And this is in
Mhm.
many ways, this is actually how racism is formulated, right? Is it the
Mhm.
idea of us believing that racism exists is essentially created through my judgments about people, right? And so if I
Mhm.
believe that this person always has it out for me, like let's say it's a school teacher, and if I believe like, "Oh, this school teacher doesn't like me and always has it out for me," well, that's where I start making my racist remarks or my prejudice remarks, right? Well, guess what? All of these things, these are judgments that turn into bitterness, and the only way to heal from that is through forgiveness.
So once a person's ready to own those feelings and break that cycle, how do we forgive?
There's a couple of different things that tie into forgiveness. Number one, you've got to acknowledge it. We talked about that just a while ago here. So you have to acknowledge that you are bitter. You got to acknowledge that you are hurting. You have been wronged. You have been pained, or you've gone through some sort of trauma. You've just got to own it. You got to acknowledge that that does exist inside of you. Number one, that's number one. Number two, you've got to take the time to consider what are the judgments that I've made about this person, because it's not just the event, right? We've talked about this. It's not just the event that's hurting you. It's the judgments that you have about that person that actually hurt you more. So what are those? You got to start writing those things down. Number three, the most important thing, you have to verbally forgive somebody. So you don't have to go to them, but you've got to be willing to actually take the time to say, "Man, I choose to forgive Bob for doing this, for saying this. This is what I believe about him, but I choose to forgive him." It's that verbal declaration that allows us to finally let go of all of that belief and the suffering that goes along with it. The fourth thing that I realize that people need to do to actually execute forgiveness is you have to be willing to hand it over to a higher power. And this
Mhm.
to me was the actual key. So think of it from this perspective. If I walk outside today in the world and I get assaulted by somebody, if I come to you, Kim, and I tell you about it as my friend, you'll be able to comfort me and take care of me, make sure that I'm doing well, right? Because that's the level
Mhm.
of authority that you have. But if I actually go to the police officer, I can now take it a whole nother level. And because they have a higher level of authority of dealing with the assault, now what happens is I'm more inclined to start healing, and I'm more inclined to actually receive the feelings of safety. Like I can actually begin to feel that I'm safe now. And that's because there's a higher authority. Well, forgiveness needs the same kind of concept, because if I don't hand it over to somebody, I'll never actually let go of it, because I'll never truly believe that something will be done. So it really does need a little bit of humility of knowing that there's a higher being with higher authority than us human beings who truly loves and cares about us and is willing to take over this hurt and pain on our behalf. And when I let it go to that higher being, to God, man, it feels so great to finally let go of that.
Can you share some stories where the opposite, so being unforgiving, has hindered people?
I worked with a couple once where both of them struggled a lot with insecurity. And what would happen is in this one situation, the insecurity would bring this person to be so triggered in levels of anger that they never ever dealt with it. And because they kept denying it and they kept making it about their partner, that marriage dissolved, because there's literally no way around it, right? There's no way
There was
to
no coming
live
back.
even in a safe way, right? If this person doesn't acknowledge it. So that's an example of how, um, forgiveness has absolutely destroyed a relationship. On the other hand, though, let me give you an example of how forgiveness has healed somebody. So I worked with a model many years ago where she always believed that no guy would ever date her past 3 months. And what we end up realizing was that years ago, she had dated somebody who broke up with her on the third month and left her for somebody else. Well, once we forgave that person, she was so cleaned up on the inside, she never even believed or recited that belief anymore. That she was so clean on the inside that she ended up attracting to her the right guy. And so she met this wonderful man about 30 days later, and they're now married and 2 kids. So here's an example of how forgiveness healed somebody to have the life that they want. But at the same time, an example of how a person who chose not to forgive actually ended up allowing bitterness to destroy their marriage.
Polar opposites in that situation.
Yeah.
I can see that we're actually almost out of time. Are there a couple little tidbits that you'd like to share with our audience before we wrap this up?
Yeah, I think my greatest invitation for those of you guys that are listening is that if this at all in any way resonates with you, please don't take time to think more about it. Take some action towards it. Reach out to me. Send me an email. Let me know how this podcast or this episode affected you and what things you might need to forgive. I would love to correspond with you. And if you'd be open to even coming in for a consultation, I can begin to help you see more clearly what those areas are that are hurting you in a lot clearer way. So please address it. I invite you all that if this has impacted you this session, share it with your friends, share it with some family members, share it with people that you care about. Get the word out that we the quicker we can deal with the things that hurt us, that create bitterness inside of us, the quicker we'll be able to love deeper, the quicker we'll be able to care deeper, and the quicker we'll be able to have the life that we truly want.
Rockie, thank you so much for today's conversation. As always, it's been a pleasure chatting with you today on this episode of Love Talks. Just a reminder that Rockie, like he said, is available for a free consultation. Just visit him at claritycoach.ca to set up an appointment. And Rockie, tell us where else we can find you online.
You can find me at claritycoach.ca/love talks. That's claritycoach.ca/love talks. And all my contact information is there.
Thanks again so much. I'll catch you on the next episode of Love Talks, where Rockie talks about pride, the number one killer of all marriages. I can't wait to have that conversation. It sounds like a juicy yet helpful conversation to have with you. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this episode. Get in touch with Rockie Lee anytime for a free consultation at claritycoach.ca.
Thanks for listening to the Clarity Coach Podcast with Rockie Lee, Strategic Intervention Coach. If you have any questions regarding Clarity Coach or the Clarity Coach workshops, please call us at 778-883-7203. That's 778-883-7203. And visit us online at www.claritycoach.ca. That's www.claritycoach.ca.